Hi, welcome to our fourth day of our 14th annual NOLA ILC Information Literacy Forum. And this is our fifth online conference. So we're so glad that everyone can make it. And if you've been here all week, thank you. Thank you for continuing. We have enjoyed all of our presentations so far. My name is Brandy Brabante. I'm the library director at Nicholls State University, and I'm a member of the NOLA ILC Executive Board. Our chat monitor today is NOLA ILC's Vice Chair, Courtney Stortz. And before we get to today's presenters, there are a couple housekeeping matters we need to take care of. Sorry, let me backtrack. I almost forgot one of the most important things. I'd like to read our land acknowledgement statement, and that will also be put into the chat, a link to that. Okay, so here we go. Sorry about that, y'all. Technical difficulties. I didn't practice land acknowledgement statements. Okay, we want to start by acknowledging the original inhabitants of this land. The city of New Orleans is a continuation of a multicultural indigenous civilization on the Mississippi River, known for thousands of years as the Bulbancha, a Choctaw term meaning place of many tongues. The Choctaw, Homa, Chitimacha, Biloxi, and other native peoples have lived on this land since time, and the resilient voices of Native Americans remain an inseparable part of our local culture. So you can find our full land acknowledgement statement on our website. So now, before we get to today's presenters, there are a couple of housekeeping matters. We'll have two presentations and one lightning talk today. Presentations will last for 30 minutes, and we'll have 15 minutes for questions and answering. Lightning talks will be 5 to 10 minutes, with any time remaining for Q&A. Feel free to type your questions into the chat box at any time. Our chat monitor, Courtney, is going to keep track of them for our Q&A sessions. You can also use our chat box to let us know about any technical problems that you think we may be having on our end. So in our chat box, we have the URL to our link tree, which is going to include our social media channels and the land acknowledgement and action statement links. So on a final note, this forum is being recorded and it'll be shared on our YouTube channel soon. All right, so today we are honored to welcome our presenters, Aimee Ardonne, Jakira Gilmore, and Brandon West. So we'll get started with Aimee with her presentation, Sensory Programming at Your Library, Creating Meaningful Hands-on Learning Experiences Through Imaginative and Messy Play. So go ahead, Aimee, you can take it away.
All right, good morning, everyone. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, just confirming everybody can see my screen. Okay, perfect. And I'm also going to apologize if I look like I'm looking all over the place. I have two monitors. One has my notes and one has the presentation. So thank you guys so much for joining me today. I'm excited to share the next 30 minutes with you guys to discuss the importance of sensory programming at your library and how it can enhance early literacy skills and school readiness initiatives. So first, I'd like to tell you guys a little bit about me. If you were in my presentation on Monday, you've seen this picture of my dog, but he's so cute, so I'm going to leave it here. I am a branch librarian in the Ascension Parish Library System. If you don't know where Ascension Parish is, we're kind of in the sweet spot between Baton Rouge and New Orleans. I have over 7 years of library experience, including 4 years in youth programming and 2 in management. My work really centers on empowering and developing my staff, fostering early literacy through thoughtful programming, and cultivating strong community partnerships to expand our reach. Outside of the library, I love reading, playing trivia. My trivia team is the Dewey Decimators, and we are all librarians. I love playing Stardew Valley and board games and snuggling my cute dog, Jack, that is on the screen here. So now we'll get started with the actual bulk of my presentation. And I'd like to ask for our chat monitor to please drop the link to my Padlet in the chat. The Padlet that's going to be linked has access to the slides, all of the polls that I'm doing, and you can also answer the polls in the chat, and it'll have extra resources for you to explore later. So with that being said, does your library currently offer sensory-based programming for babies, toddlers, and preschoolers? I'm curious to know what your libraries are doing. Okay, I see a yes, that's good. And I'm sure most people, the answer will be yes. Because a lot of sensory programming, you may not even realize that it is sensory programming. So I'll give you guys a second to think about that. And then we'll move on. Let's see. So I wanted to start with this photo collage. These are pictures from several of our sensory play oriented programs at my library. I'm going to talk about each of the programs in more detail throughout the presentation, but I wanted to start with an illustration of what these programs might look like for you. Most of you are probably already incorporating sensory play activities into your programming, but I want to start by defining sensory play and what it is. So defining sensory play. Sensory play is any activity that allows the participant to engage with their senses in a structured or even a semi-structured environment. Brightwheel defines sensory play as any play-based learning activity that stimulates children's senses of touch, taste, smell, sight, hearing, body awareness, and balance. And finally, my definition is learning through play, which is just really fun, and they're not even going to know that they're learning. So you see some pictures here. We've got a sensory bin. We had some Play-Doh, and this looks like a really cute picture of me reading to a child. And I was actually trying to get her to let go of the book so I could bring it to our next friends who wanted to see it, but she is very sweet and we love her. So now I want to talk about the types of sensory play. There's many types of sensory play that children can engage in. Each of these categories of sensory play aligns with a specific sense or skill. So first, I want to start by discussing tactile sensory play. That is activities where children explore with their hands. Vestibular sensory play is activities where children balance and move their bodies. Proprioception, that would be activities where children practice their spatial awareness. Auditory is activities where children are using their hearing to differentiate between sounds. Visual sensory play is activities where children explore visual cues to support their vision development. And olfactory and taste would be activities where children, smell and or taste objects. So now I have some examples of each type of sensory play and what it might look like in your library. Tactile could be something like tying shoes, writing, or building. Vestibular could be monkey bars, swings, and rolling. Proprioception could be something like pushing, pulling, or jumping. Auditory could be clapping and reading aloud. Visual could be color mixing or hide and seek. And olfactory and taste could be smelling flowers, tasting lemon juice, anything like that. So now I'm going to jump into my second poll. Which types of sensory play do you find the most difficult to incorporate into your programming? For me, and I'll kind of talk for a second while y'all think about it. For me, smell and taste, because it is very hard to plan a program for this age with smell and taste, choking hazards, allergies. We get a lot of kids who do taste things that maybe we don't want them to taste, like our books or our toys. But just so you can think about, what do you maybe struggle to incorporate into your programming, and hopefully you can get some ideas here about how you can incorporate them in the future. So for the sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and keep moving on. I want to talk about the benefits of sensory play now. Sensory play has so many benefits. In addition to developing the specific senses your activity might target, such as balance, motor skills, anything like that, this type of play aids in language development, also cognitive development, emotional regulation, creativity, and social interactions. I recently read a book called The Anxious Generation, and the author was Jonathan Haidt. And I just want to quote him for a second. He said, synchronous face-to-face physical interactions and rituals are a deep, ancient, and underappreciated part of human evolution. So when we're hosting these sensory play activities at our library, we are modeling these appropriate activities and interactions that enhance the activities so our parents and our caregivers can bring them home and emulate them. It's also a really versatile version of play and programming. Activities can be tailored to any season, any event, any holiday, or any interest that your patrons have. Many activities can also be really easily tied into books or library services, and it doesn't have to be expensive. Many sensory play activities can be done with items that you already have at home or in your library. And those are my favorite types of programs because they're very easily replicable for our caregivers. And those caregivers really are laying the foundation for their children's early literacy skills. So it's important for us to give them effective examples of that. And here I have a little bit more about what I talked about. It really helps children's brains develop. And it's not just developing the senses that are targeted by those activities, but again, language development, cognitive development, motor skills. It's just such an amazing form of play that doesn't even feel like they're learning, but they're actually learning so much. So now I want to talk for a second about sensory play and literacy. So first I want to talk about Every Child Ready to Read. This is the second version, so it's ECRR2. ECRR2 includes 5 practices that librarians can use to promote early literacy development, and those are talking, singing, reading, writing, and playing. While your sensory play will likely incorporate most or all of these practices, playing is directly linked to sensory programming. To paraphrase a statement from Ohio Ready to Read that I have here, play helps children to develop their language skills by helping them to think symbolically, as well as just how to put their thoughts into words. How cool is that? We're teaching them how to put their thoughts into words just while we think we're just having fun. It's just amazing. Now I want to talk a little bit about early learning and development standards, which are ELDSs. Early learning and development standards are a set of competencies that can be used by caregivers to define and illustrate the developmental milestones and expectations of each stage of early childhood and kind of emphasize school readiness in their children. So I'm going to talk about Louisiana specifically, but I encourage you to look up your state's ELDSs if you're not in Louisiana, because several of them, I looked at different states and they're all very similar. But before I talk about them, why as librarians should we be familiar with them? Especially, in public libraries where we're not directly embedded in schools. Sometimes we're the first or even the only early childhood environment that our youngest patrons get to experience. So it's important for us to develop our programs thoughtfully so that we can give them the opportunities to grow and develop in all of their domains. So the ELDSs in Louisiana are organized into 5 domains of children's development: approaches to learning, cognitive development, and general knowledge, which includes content areas of creative thinking and expression, mathematics, science, and social studies, language and literacy development, physical well-being and motor development, and social and emotional development. So on the next slide, I have again, these are reasons why we should think about ELDSs and why they're important. Development in one domain influences the development of other domains. The early childhood environment should provide opportunities for children to explore materials and engage in concrete activities and to interact with peers and adults in order to construct their understanding about the world around them. So I also have a list here of different ELDSs that I feel most strongly correlate to sensory programming. I'm not going to read all of them just for the sake of time, but I do have them linked on my Padlet that was shared in the chat, just if you kind of want to get an idea of how this ties into school readiness and early literacy. So the final benefit that I'm going to talk about with sensory play is modeling interactions. Earlier, I briefly discussed how librarians can model appropriate interactions for caregivers during sensory programming, but I wanted to discuss it a little bit more because I feel that it's so important. Harvard University's Center on the Developing Child has a practice that they call serve and return, which is a framework for how caregivers can meaningfully interact with their children as they play. I have an example here and of serve and return. So this is like a very basic overview, but I encourage you to look at the links in the Padlet to get more information. So the first step of serve and return is to notice the serve and share the child's focus of attention. So what are they looking at? What are they focusing on? Then you should return the serve by supporting and encouraging, acknowledging you've noticed their focus, nod, verbally respond to them, move them closer. Then you want to give that object a name. You want to name anything and everything that they're looking at. You want to take turns with them and wait just to make sure you're encouraging that interaction to keep going back and forth. Be patient with the child as they're formulating their response. It's a really big world and they have a lot of words and they don't know all the words. So you have to be patient with them, make sure that they're forming those thoughts and you're being receptive to them. Finally, you want to practice endings and beginnings. If the child signals that they're ready to move on, support them, put them down, ask them what else they want to do. And I included this picture here on the screen. It was taken at one of our Playdates programs, which I'm going to talk about later as one of our big successes. It really illustrates how this mom used the serve and return framework, likely without even knowing that she was doing it. Her child noticed the hanging decorations in our activity room, so she lifted him up to see them more closely. She pointed to each object that he was looking at and gave it a name, and then waited for him to respond by choosing another object. When he was finished, he indicated this, and she put him down to continue playing. It's just so simple, but so important. There's some other ways that we can model interactions and encourage early literacy development during sensory play. We want to ask questions. For example, what do you think will happen when we mix these colors together? Or, I see a cow on this page. What sound does a cow make? Another thing is to be silly. By us being silly and playing and dancing and singing with our young patrons, we're showing them that it's okay for them to also be silly and play and dance and sing. I always encourage our caregivers to fully participate in the activities with their children so that they also feel comfortable exploring with us in the library. Finally, we want to narrate activities as we play. For example, oh, I see you're building a tower with those blocks. How long do you think that it'll take you to build a very tall tower? How tall do you think it's going to be? I see that you're choosing the bigger blocks for the bottom of your tower. That's going to make a great base. It not only helps to encourage their language development, but it also encourages confidence and autonomy in what they're doing. Parenting and caregiving doesn't come with instructions. As librarians, it's important for us to be these examples for them so they can emulate them at home and just continue with that development, even if we only see them like an hour a week or something like that. So now that we have a foundation on what sensory programming is and why it's important, let's talk about how you can plan a program of your own for the library. So planning your program. There's some different considerations that I like to take when planning a program. And it's important to think through the activities to make sure that they're not only engaging and educational, but that they're also safe and in line with your institution's programming policies. I'm going to discuss each of these in more detail, but here's a brief introduction. Types of senses. What types of senses do I want to focus on? Restrictions. Do I have restrictions on what type of activities are viable? Can I serve food, etc.? Physical space. Is my space indoors or outdoors? Can I use water? Can I use Play-Doh? Anything messy? Age limits. How old is my target audience? Are these activities developmentally appropriate? Potential risk. Do any of my activities contain choking hazards? And budget and supplies. What is my budget for this program and what do I already have? So I'm going to talk about each of these a little bit more. The first consideration is types of senses. What senses does your program target? Ideally, you should focus on more than one sense per program. However, taste and smell, like I mentioned, might not always be feasible, but there are some creative ways to do it. Some examples of activities to target senses could be touch, finger painting, sensory bends, Play-Doh. To target hearing, you could do read alouds of rhyming books, songs, and clapping games. For sight, you could create patterns, you could sort objects by color, or you could play hide and seek. We also, as you can see here, we have this little mirror toy, and the babies love to look at themselves in the mirrors. The next consideration is restrictions. You want to consider any restrictions that your program might have. For example, are you serving food? How will you go about serving that food? Have you included an allergen warning in your promotion and also within the room during your program? Are you playing music or showing a movie? Do you have the appropriate licensing and permissions to do that? The photo I have on the side here is from a Wonka inspired program that we did where we both showed the movie and served candy. So we had to really consider these factors during our planning process. And the next thing I want to talk about is physical space. It's usually my most limiting consideration. Like, for example, I would love to have Bluey visit my library, but my meeting space is kind of small and I don't have outdoor infrastructure to do that. So we are still trying to figure that one out. So you want to make sure that you've considered if your programming space is going to be suitable for the activities you've planned. One thing that we've done that helps us is we've broken up our bigger programs into 2 spaces across the library. So you can consider if you have the ability to do that. It also goes beyond just how much square footage you have. For example, can you use water or Play-Doh or paint? Can you hang things on the wall? It's something to think about and maybe consult with your administration about. And the next thing is age limits. If your programs are anything like mine, they usually attract families, which inevitably means that some of your children are going to be older or younger than your target audience. Once you've identified your target audience, take a moment to think about how or if your activities could be modified if a younger or older sibling wants to participate. If your program has a hard age limit, how are you going to enforce it? It can be really difficult in the moment to tell a patron that their child can't participate in an activity, so try to think about that reasoning ahead of time so you're prepared. One thing that helps us, we try to have coloring sheets and things available in our programs because usually the younger and the older siblings, if they aren't interested in a specific activity, they'll at least want to color. So that's something that helps us. So next, I want to talk about perhaps the most important aspect of planning a sensory program, which is identifying and mitigating any potential risk. When planning, consider if your activities could pose a choking hazard for your younger patrons. How would you monitor these stations? In the image here, for example, we have a choking hazard sign next to our sensory bin, and we had a staff member also monitoring the activities. Additionally, if you're using paint or markers, are they non-toxic and washable? And if you're using water or bubbles, how are you making sure that you're not creating a slipping hazard? For example, in our Let's Get Messy program that I'm going to talk about in a few minutes, we had so much water and we kept wet floor signs on display. And we also had a mop in the room that we were just constantly mopping up puddles as they came up. So finally, what is your budget like? What can you use that you already have? If you have to purchase something, how can it be reused? Another thing I like to think about is, can the caregivers replicate these activities at home with their own supplies? For example, this program, we used turkey basters and measuring cups and things, and they had so much fun. And it was just playing with water and stuff we already had. So I wanted to give you guys an example list of some on-hand materials that we have that we use for our sensory programming. And I'll leave it up for a second, but I do also have it linked in the slides. These are just some things that we found very helpful. And anything with an asterisk, I would recommend having a choking hazard sign next to you if you're going to use it in your programs, depending on the age group. So finally, I want to talk about fun ideas and some of our sensory programming successes that we've done. All of these programs were planned by staff at the Ascension Parish Library, and they went over incredibly well. So I'd like to take a moment to share some ideas. The first one is spooky sensory play. We had masking tape mummies to make, creepy crawly noodle sensory cauldrons, and we also had monster bowling. Like all of the programs that I'll discuss today, this was what I call a pop-in program where patrons can choose the activities that they want to do and then complete them at their own pace. They don't have to stay for the whole time. They don't have to do every activity. So we have some different comments here from our patrons, like, I would never do this at my house. So I'm glad he gets to do this somewhere. This is awesome. And so perfect. Thank you guys for doing this. And it is just super easy and fun. The next thing we did was pretend play day, which we just had this January. Using some of our dramatic play equipment and a lot of creativity, we made Library Town in our meeting room. We had 5 locations. We had a grocery store, a library, a construction site, a vet clinic, and a post office. And the kids had activities they could do at each station, such as writing postcards, checking out books and having story times, creating towers, helping the sick stuffed animals, and also grocery shopping. This program was a blast. It was so much fun. And it was really heartwarming because a lot of the parents, in fact, I think almost all of the parents were actually on the floor participating with the kids, bringing in the sick stuffed animals, checking out books, things like that. To quote the mother of the adorable little librarian here, typing on her typewriter, with those glasses and the typewriter, she looks just like my mother, and I have to get a picture of her. We had another little boy who came, and it was his first time in the library. His big brother came, but this was his first time, and they didn't know about the program. They just popped in, so it was really special. So we had a great time with this. And again, a lot of this stuff was things we already had, our kitchen set, and this is a cardboard box, our mailbox here. So this was a really fun day. The next thing we had was another, oh, I'm a little bit out of order. Sorry, I have my notes out of order. Pint-sized pumpkin palooza. It was another fall-themed sensory program that we did. We had ghost bowling, mess-free color blending, where you put the pumpkin in the Ziploc bag and mix the red and yellow together. We had shape sorting, and the favorite was the sensory bins. This was just lentils and white beans, and we drew jack-o'-lantern faces on empty gallon jugs. The kids scooped the lentils into the jugs. They sorted them by color. They did not want to leave the station. And the children were just screaming pumpkins throughout the whole program. So it was very fun, very easy, and it really engaged them with a lot of the senses that we talked about. This one was aptly named Let's Get Messy. This is quite possibly the easiest and most replicable sensory play program we've ever done. We had finger painting where they could paint with their hands, or some kids painted with their feet. And then they left their masterpieces with us to dry while they enjoyed the next activities. So on the other side of the room, it was all water. We had 4 sensory bins. We had bear soup, where they could scoop the little counting bears and sift them and things like that. We had turkey basters, measuring cups, and the sponge bin. We had one kid who was playing with the measuring cups and just going, "I'm doing science." The turkey basters will get used as water guns, so just prepare for that. But my favorite comment was one dad said, "Now that I know the kids enjoy this, we'll do this at home, outside, of course, but we'll do it at home because we have all this stuff." So this was very fun, very engaging, very easy. Truck time. Truck time was actually born out of me scrolling Pinterest for ideas for my twin nephews who had just turned 3. They were coming to stay for an overnight visit. I found so many ideas that I wanted to make it a library program. So we had a color sorting pom-pom excavation station where they would scoop them out and put them by color. We had a truck collage station with some coloring and trace the line pages. We had a mud track station where the kids could run these little trucks over a Ziploc bag filled with brown paint and make tracks. We also had a felt map with movable buildings that we just Velcroed on it to run the trucks across. Super easy, very fun. We had the little hard hats from a previous program. We had some comments here like, we normally go to a different branch, but we had to do truck time. This is much better than the last art program since this paint is enclosed in a bag. We had a great time with this one. Finally, I want to talk about Playdates. Playdates is a program that we have between our story times. Our story times, we do 8 weeks on and 8 weeks off, but we wanted to have an activity for the babies that happened every Thursday morning at the same time so that they would always have something to do and a place to socialize. So at Playdates, we just put out toys and books in our activity room on the mats, and we let them play for an hour. It's that easy. The parents are able to socialize, and the kids are able to learn and explore in an unstructured environment. It's been really wonderful to see the children become friends, and a lot of them have even started hanging out outside of the library. So it really is the highlight of my Thursday mornings. So we have some adorable kids here, and this little girl on the bottom, her name is Hazel, and we love her, and her little sunglasses are so cute. Oh, and we have baby prom. This is a new addition since the last time I've given this presentation. This was the best thing we've ever done, in my opinion. We encouraged all the babies to come in their best outfits. We made corsages and boutonnieres out of Velcro flowers. We had a backdrop. We had a dance floor. We had some goldfish and juice. It was just super fun. We had several parents who like took off of work to come with their kids to baby prom. We took pictures and we uploaded them to a Google Drive so the parents could have them. We had a red carpet. We're already planning a snowball, which is going to be a winter formal for the babies. I would recommend planning around a holiday so that they have their fancy outfits and they can wear them more than once. But it's been very successful for us, and it was just so cute. We also have art and music jamboree. This was another one we did recently. This one we just put tables on their sides and we covered them with craft paper and they could watercolor. And we put out all of our little music instruments for them to play with. One of the babies kept going, "I'm an artist." Very cute, very fun. So my final takeaways and tips for this before I get into questions and all of that. If you're able to utilize all of your staff when coming up with program ideas. At my branch, for example, the way we plan programs, I send them a blank PowerPoint every quarter, and I ask them to throw any and all ideas that they have on there for every age group. After a few weeks, I ask them to vote on their favorites, and we end up with amazing ideas that I never would have even thought of. So your staff are your best resource for coming up with these ideas. Flexibility is key. Our most successful sensory-based programs have included stations that were not very structured, like they're very creative, and it allows the kids and their caregivers to explore at their own pace and take charge of their own activities. And finally, skill building and learning don't have to be boring or expensive. As I mentioned here, a lot of these programs had things that we already had, and they were very inexpensive and very replicable. So with that, thank you so much. This is my contact information on the screen. I also have a QR code here for the Padlet. It'll have all the slides. It'll have a bunch of resources that I didn't get to talk about, but I used to make the presentation. And if anybody has any questions or any ideas they'd like to share, please let me know. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen so we can do questions.
Hi, that was great, Aimee. Our chat monitor, Courtney, will be checking the chat and we'll let you know if we have any questions.
Okay, so there is a lot of love, a lot of stuff that says it's very cute. There's a really long one, so it's a two-parter. So I'm gonna read the first one, let you answer, and then I'll come back and ask the second part of it.
Okay.
It says, do you ever do anything that's related to drinking water instead of soda or juice that teaches them the difference between a healthy drink versus one that's not so healthy?
We have not in the past. We always try, at least in our programs, to include. We really don't serve soda unless it's like teens and up, but we do water or like fruit juice. I do really like that idea, and it's something I'm going to pass on for our programming staff. Because our system's going to have a new branch soon that will have a teaching kitchen, and they're hoping to do some things with like healthy cooking and healthy choices. So I think that would be a really cool program to have for our kids.
Okay, so the second part is we work with the GSK Franklin Institute for their science and their summer program. The target audience is grades 2 through 6, and she wants to know what can be incorporated into a library setting. So she works in a college center, not a library.
Possibly. I would have to look and see. I'm not super familiar with that organization, but I I think really anything is possible to be incorporated into a library setting. So I would be really excited to see something like that for our older kids. And if it could be adapted to our younger kids, that would be awesome.
Does anyone else have any other questions?
I think that's great. We have a while you guys are thinking of questions, I was just gonna tell Amy this was really great. For any other academic librarians out there, if your institution has a daycare center or a little school that they work with, we have one on our campus at Nichols, and we have used summer as a time to try to bring in the older ones. So it is possible in an academic library as well. If you have someone local you could reach out to if you're looking to make another community connection. All right. Well, thank you so much, Amy.
Yes, thank you guys.
Thanks. We're going to move on to our next lightning talk here. And that will be for Jakira Gilmore, and she will be giving us a session on undergrad library information science program. So go ahead and take it away, Jakira.
Hello, everyone. Can you guys hear me very well? I
Yes.
am going to share my screen, put it in presentation mode. Okay, so for starters, I'm just going to start off by saying this is informational for anyone that is in undergrad or if anyone is maybe in community college or why am I not like move? I'm trying to put this in presentation mode. There we go. So this is for starters. I'm going to say this is more informational for people that are probably in community college, undergrad, people that are probably working in the library that may don't have their degree just yet, or maybe thinking about going to school for library information, may not want to get their master's just yet, but want to substitute for undergrad. Well, according to Seymour, yes, you can. Yes, you can. Can you get a bachelor's degree in library information? Yes, you can. I'm just going to start off by saying, from my experience, most people will say this is rare. Most people have never heard of this degree before. And I'm just going to start off by saying I am very grateful. I am, I would say I'm humble just for being able to hear about this opportunity, going forward to get this opportunity, and I would love to share this with all. So I'm only going to share mostly information of this program, and I'm going to share my story as well. So I would say my story is a good informational. It's basically like give you guys the idea of the stages that I went through and pretty much what any Generation Z is going through after graduation. So I'm excited. I hope you guys enjoy. I know we have little time, so I'm about to just stop talking because I have a problem with talking. And yes, let's go. So for the next slide, I am going to start off by saying that this program is accredited by American Library Association. Why is this so important for this program to be accredited by American Library Association? So ALA is required or highly preferred by employers. So furthermore, a bachelor's in LIS is not required for graduates that want to become more attractive. So I would say for graduates who just entered a bachelor's, will be more attractive to employers. So that would increase more library opportunities for people who ended up getting their undergrad with this because of American Library Association is highly required and highly preferred for some institutions. And that will be a good look right on your resume. Oh, this undergrad, there's American Library Association accredited. It will highly look really good on your resume, CV, cover letter. It has definitely had a lot of traction with me. So I'm gonna just start off with saying there's 100% online, accredited master's option, and there's also a study abroad program you guys can do. So if you want to get into this program, you have to have 45 required LIS credits, 3 program options. You could be a minor, bachelor's, or you could be in a dual major. I didn't even know that you could have a dual major. I had a friend, her name is Elizabeth. She was a history major, but she also was dual in library information. So she was history and she had a minor in library information. So you could do that as well. Some people who may want to enter their undergrad into something else, but you just want a minor in library information, you could do that as well. So did I press something or am I looking at something else? I think I pressed something. Sorry, you guys, this is a Mac and I'm trying to learn this Mac thing. And I think I pressed something.
Oh, no, I mean, Jakira, we are still looking at your slides. So on our end, it's still good.
On my end, I wasn't looking. Okay, long as y'all can see, that's good with me. I like MacBooks, but I love my HP. So the mission. This was last updated May 24th. So, the mission of the School of Library Information Science, SLIS, is to prepare diverse population of qualified professionals for roles in libraries, archives, and other informational environments. Through evidence-based active learning, students gain appropriate knowledge, apply scholarships and skills to serve the information needs of their diverse communities. So there are so many classes. I would definitely say I learned so much, even with the little experience that I had in library before I entered this program. So many classes. There was a class of children, reading children's books. It's children's literacy. Like there's so many classes you can think of. And I'm thinking, if I'm not mistaken, Stacy Krill, she even wanted to thinking about adding more. Classes in this program, which I think is amazing. So all of the basic needs that you need to know as a librarian, you'll be able to get that in undergrad. So another thing I want to mention, according to College Factual, USM ranked #1 as best library school in the United States. That is a really good look, especially for a degree that is very rare and not too many people will know about this. We're actually ranked #1 as best library school in the United States. So, about this program and what we require. So, there is a fully online undergrad and graduate or graduate certificate program. So, it's fully online. You do not have to go up. You do not have any required meetings. It is fully online. No out-of-state tuition, which is good. Like I said, no required campus visits and study abroad opportunities. I'll be talking about that in the future and scholarships availability. There is the website. There is the phone number, QR code, and I will put the links at the end. Let's hope and pray I figured that out. Yes, with this MacBook. So, what did I learn in this program? I've learned I had classes of reference resources, collection development, school libraries. I did that class. That was really good. Rural and small libraries. That was really good by Johnny Pace. Basic advanced cataloging. I took that and I'm also taking that in my master's. That is a good class. Information technology and libraries, web development, evaluation, and storytelling. That's the class I was telling you guys about. You literally will take a class of storytelling or programming for youth. And I think what my favorite thing about that class, you would literally pick a book and just read it to the class like you're reading to children. I think it's adorable. I think it's cute. And I will mention that professor very soon. And also children's or young adult literature. Where am I go? So, how did I find Southern Miss, or did Southern Miss find me? I don't know. It was just a rare coincidence. So, I'm gonna start the story off real short, real cute. So, I was alum, as you can see on the right-hand bottom. This is my graduation pic. Yes, I was one of the 100 years students. I graduated in 2021 at Delgado. I earned my associate's degree. During this time, I was a student worker at Delgado's library. I was very in between. Do I want to become a librarian? I like this, but I don't know. Is it for me? I don't know. Then I had she was an adjunct and I was a student worker. Her name was Ashley Marshall. She's still here. I'm not saying was, she's still here. Ashley Marshall. So Ashley Marshall, it was very interesting because she would talk about USM all the time. And I'm like, wow. And she was also working on her master's. And I was so inspired by her. And I would just say, girl, just keep going. Whatever you going for, you got it. And I was just so inspired by Ashley Marshall. And for her to be my colleague and to seeing her progress now is just beautiful. And I can't wait for the next slide to talk about it. So 2020, COVID came. During that time, student workers were not allowed to work on campus, so I had to find another job. So I ended up becoming a school librarian at Langston Hughes Academy, is in New Orleans, Louisiana. This is also a first line school, and AmeriCorps was associated with this. So I was a AmeriCorps member. For 2 years, I was a librarian. This is Anna Gentry. Shout out to her. She taught me a lot of being a school librarian how to support students, how to run a book fair. I've done so much. That first year, I did not have a degree for one. I didn't even have much experience. And after that year, my first year, I was awarded a Best AmeriCorps member for 2020 and 2021. So I was thinking to myself, I'm pretty good at this. And once I thought, okay, well, if I'm pretty good at this, well, let's just see how this goes. My second year, that was when I graduated from Delgado. Um, I was still debating if I want to go to school to become a librarian. So during that time, I earned my associate's degree, general studies. I was just trying to think of a backup plan, like, okay, so what do I need to get my bachelor's for? I want to go to school, but I also like librarianship. So I looked all over. I did LSU, a Southeastern. I looked all over the state of Louisiana. I couldn't find any program that was undergrad in library information. And I'm just like, well, do I want to get my undergrad in something else? And I didn't really see myself getting my undergrad in anything else because I knew what I wanted to do and I love what I do. So apparently, which is a funny story, is my aunt, aka my mom's twin, she lives in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. And during this time, um, she and my mom, they would talk a lot. And I remember I was just still looking for this undergrad. And my mom had mentioned, well, Jakira, I know your auntie was telling me about Southern Miss. And I was looking at their programs. They have undergrad at Southern Miss. So my mom looked at it and then I realized Ashley, that's the first thing I would think of. Ashley Marshall. I was like, I remember Ashley was telling me about library information. I thought it was just master's. I didn't think it was undergrad. So I guess I was not paying attention what Ashley was talking about. I don't know how that I even overlooked that, but I should have did my research at first. But thank God for mama. You know, everybody have to have that one mama that is curious. And I guess that's what makes me a librarian because I have a mama that would have my back and she did her research and she found it. And that was my story. So I guess the funny meme, Auntie Chill, that was actually a year 22. Southern Miss went viral with a football player. They won a championship. So I thought to be funny, Auntie Chill. That's what makes me think how I was introduced to Southern Miss was Ashley Marshall and my auntie. That's a pretty funny story. So here is my college life of a 25-year-old college student. So remember that woman I told you about, Ashley Marshall? Turns out my coworker was my professor the whole time. She was my professor, and it's very funny because when I signed up for classes and I saw her name, I was just like shocked because at first the whole time I was thinking Ashley was just a librarian at USM. I did not know she was a professor. And don't get me wrong, I was extremely nervous going into this program because I'm just fresh out New Orleans. I was coming from a community college. I was like, what if I don't keep up? And then when I saw Ashley Marshall, the stress just breathed out because I just feel so comfortable around Ashley. And I would definitely say Miss Marshall was just a great professor. I felt so comfortable in her class. I felt comfortable asking questions. I may not seem like a shy person, but in class, I'm really shy. So sometimes I'll be scared to ask a bunch of questions. But when I found out she was my professor, all of the nervousness came through and she did amazing. And she also teaches storytelling. She is the best. If you think about going undergrad, she will be the best storytelling teacher. She's amazing. She would literally read to us like we're kids, and I love it. We will be in class, she'll have a book out, her favorite book, and she will read. She makes the most amazing voices, best storyteller hands down. Love me some Ashley Marshall. Yes, so to move forward, I know we have a little time. I've worked two jobs. I was a book supervisor and I was a work study student at USM Library Gulf Coast. So I know what you're thinking, how if you came from New Orleans all the way to Mississippi. So the thing about it was my mother actually moved to Gulfport, Mississippi. So when she moved to Gulfport, Mississippi, I did what any other Generation Z just did. I ended up moving back home to mama. I was like, you know what? I want to go back to school. I want to focus. I'm moving back home to mom, but I did not want to take a drive. I would drive to Hattiesburg every day. Thank God it was an online program. So I did everything online, but I also discovered there was a campus. USM actually has three campuses. One in Hattiesburg, one in Long Beach, Mississippi, and I think one in Gunter. There's three for sure. And apparently, Long Beach Gulfport campus was like 10 minutes away from Mama House. So I ended up becoming a bookstore supervisor. Shout out to Dee Hillard. She is one of the biggest managers. So if between 22 through 24, I was responsible for USM students' books. And that was a hard job, but I did great. And that's what I did. Um, Great experience. It taught me a lot of leadership. Being a book supervisor, it definitely showed me a lot of responsibility as well. I love that experience. And also work study student at US Library Gulf Coast. I want to give a shout out to Jamie Stanfield, Justin Easterday, and Sheila Cork. These people were amazing. When I told them that I was in the library information program, they were excited. They taught me everything I need to know. Unfortunately, I did not have a picture with them, but here are some pictures when I was in the library. Here's me and Ashley Marshall. Down at the bottom is Dee Hillard. Here is me hugging Seymour, of course. These are other two USM grads. The one next to me, I'm pretty sure she have her master's in library information. This is her roommate. I forgot their names, but yeah, these are people that I've met. I've definitely lived a little bit of the college life. It was a little weird because I was like 25 or between 24 and 25, but I had an amazing experience and yeah, it was great. So let me keep going. Yes, I studied abroad. So this young girl from New Orleans, Louisiana, decided to do something big and discover the world. And yes, I studied abroad. I went to London, England, the summer of 2023. So I studied there for 1 month. I visited 16 libraries. I've met other upcoming librarians. One actually, she works for the public library in New Orleans, right there on Loyola Avenue. I don't want to really say her name, but me and her became close. Another person, she's still in the master's program. So I've met these people, and me and these people are still in contact till this day. And this experience changed my life. It made me look at the world very differently. And I would definitely say one of my best libraries I had visit during this time, Barbican Library. I went to York University. That was my favorite. Cambridge University was my favorite. Globe Theater was my favorite. British Library, London Library, and I would say Oxford, University of Oxford was my favorite as well. So I visit these big places. I've learned so much. This is during my time. So I would want to just talk about a little bit of what they did this year. So pretty much a few weeks ago, almost 24 students, graduates and undergraduates, they were there. And the thing that I like about USM study abroad, you can go from different institutions. So when I was there in 2023, I had a one classmate. She was actually from Texas University and she was able to do our program. So if you in a different university, you can be able to sign up for this program as well, which I think is really, really cool. This year, they had 24 students, graduates and undergraduates, and they had 10 students from different institutions as well. So I thought that was really, really cool. It looked like they expanded every year, but definitely, definitely, if you are in your master's or if anybody thinking about getting into this program, I would highly suggest to study abroad. It is so much fun. Financial aid. Thank God for financial aid. Yes, you can use your financial aid. So that is a big help as well. And I'm just so blessed and I was able to experience that. And I will never forget this. And I really appreciate USM giving me this opportunity to do that. So yes, I graduated. It took me 2 years to graduate from my undergrad program, but I successfully graduated on the dean's list. I ended my last semester with a 3.8 GPA. I did really, really good. I'm really proud of myself for my accomplishment. I've learned so much. Here is me at the bottom left, shaking hands with Joe Paul. Um, I I absolutely love this program. So yes, this was a great experience, and yeah, that is me. So let's talk about life after college. I feel like I wouldn't be real enough if I did not talk about the what's going on in the world right now of job market. So yes, life after college, 20 or May 2024 is when I graduated. According to New York Federal in May 2024, there was a 4.6 unemployment rate for recent college grads. Every time I scroll down TikTok, everyone is complaining about the college. I'm sorry, not the college, the job market just crashing. So many interviews, so many applications, so many interviews. It was crazy. And I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe this is normal, maybe how this is going, who knows? This was actually my very, very first experience going through this. And to see other people in America is going through this, it is a major problem. And I really did want to talk about this because, you know, this degree is not required, but it amazes me that how I succeeded during this time. It's I still can't believe, where I'm at right now after what I was going through in the summer of 2024. So right here it says that I applied for 83. There's way more applications that I applied for in the beginning. And according to the US Bureau of Labor Statistics, I am 27 now. So during that time I graduated, I was like 25, 26. So around June, July, it was down to 3.3. July was 3.5. In August, it was 3.4. September, it was down to 3.3. October, 3.4. November, 3.5. And December, 3.4. So that was job market was the most lowest crashes. People still going through it to this day. And I'm excited for just even talking about this because just by having this degree, it amazes me how other institutions still gave me a chance and also gave me interviews. And this is what I'm going to talk about on my next slide.
Hey,
So,
Jakira. Sorry,
yeah.
just wanted to let you know, like a couple more minutes. So I don't
Oh,
know.
okay.
Yes,
Yes. Okay. I'm gonna try to speed up just a little bit. I know I'm
thanks.
talking a lot. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, so beginning when I moved back to New Orleans, I ended up being a substitute teacher. So during this time, yes, it was extremely hard. I was not getting anything. I wasn't getting anything at first. So to that point where I felt very vulnerable, I ended up emailing my old principal. He is now the CEO of a school system. I don't want to say it. To be honest, I felt like when I told him about my library
Didn't even
degree,
see
he
that
didn't really take it
text.
too much serious.
So
So,
it
yeah.
wasn't even the Sliss banner.
I'm sorry.
Hold on.
So
Oh,
I
I
ended
didn't
up
read
being
the
a sub
text. I was like, holy fuck.
Yeah, I ended up being a substitute teacher. I felt like I had no other choice of employment. During that time, I did not feel like myself. I didn't feel like myself because at the end of the day, I love librarianship. I want to become a librarian. I love children and I love working with children, but being a teacher just was not for me. But oops, but I didn't give up. I didn't give up. And I just want to give a shout out to these people from all these institutions, LSU, UNO, Loyola, LSU Health New Orleans, Tulane University, New Orleans Public Library. I want to give a shout out to Alyssa S. Plank. This woman loved my interview. She loved my story, and she was very interested in my undergrad degree. Unfortunately, I did not make it, but Alyssa S. Plank emailed me and she said that keep going. She gave me encouraging words. She kept my resume and she told me to get as much experience as I can, and she will be on the lookout. And I think that's big for me because most people, if you don't really have that much experience, most people wouldn't even give you a knowledge of the day. And I'm just going to say thank you guys so much for even giving me interviews during that time. So these institutions gave me an interview and I just didn't give up and I kept going until one day, one phone call changed everything. And who is this woman right here? Courtney. So Courtney called me one day unexpectedly. It was so random. She asked me if I can apply for an adjunct librarian position at Delgado. And yes, of course, I took this. This phone call changed my life. And I just want to give her flowers. I just want to thank her so much for this opportunity because she's been looking at me. She's been seeing me since I was ground up as a student worker. So I appreciate you, Courtney. I appreciate everything. And yes, this phone call definitely changed my life because I do work at Delgado and I'm also in Weekend Learning Commons PT desk assistant at Loyola University. Shout out to Ariana. Shout out to Riley Levy. Shout out to you guys as well because you guys were very impressed with my interview. And I know with this degree and with my experience, you guys, both of these institutions, shout out to Delgado and Loyola for giving me a chance to get this experience while I am in my master's program. So right here, I just want to give you guys all of the links. And this right here is my transcript. Yes, I am not ashamed to show you guys my undergrad transcript. These are all of my grades. This is what I have. And also this is my congratulations. I am now in the master's program. Shout out to Stacy Krill. I am very excited in this master's program. I hope she's here with me. In the chat, please say hello. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you for accepting me. And I am so glad I'm able to tell you guys about this program. I will try to give you guys all of the links in the, I'm gonna stop sharing. I'm gonna try to give you guys the links that's in there. I'm gonna just give it to Courtney. But thank y'all. I know I talk a lot, but I was trying to get everything out.
Thank you
Stacy!
so much.
Hi,
Thank you,
girl.
Jakira. And so if just in the sake of time, we're gonna go on to Brandon's, but if you have any questions for Jakira, please put them in the chat so that we can ask her those questions at the end. So thank you for that information. I did not realize about the undergrad. That was great. So next we'll have Brandon West, and he'll be doing a presentation on dynamic teaching, designing highly flexible lesson plans. So go ahead, Brandon, you can take it away.
Okay, thank you. And thank you to everybody who took out their time to be at this conference today. So, my name is Brandon West, obviously. I'm from SUNY Geneseo, where I've been a librarian here for 10 years, and 7 of those years I've been the head of research and instruction services, where I oversee the information literacy program and reference services, amongst many other things. I've been working in libraries for a total of 14 years. I actually started my career in public libraries. Um, and I did that for 2 years while I was earning my master's in library science from Texas Woman's University. Previously, in a life before that, I went to my undergrad was to become an elementary school teacher, and I did that for a few years before I realized librarianship was something I would prefer to pursue. And so a lot of my scholarship during my tenure in academic settings has been about educating librarians on how to teach more confidently and effectively. And that kind of ties into today's presentation. I'm going to be talking about how I've tried to lead my team of research and instruction librarians down a path of figuring out how we can be a little more efficient in doing our lesson planning and take some stress off our plates. And I thought it'd be useful for other librarians. So today's presentation, I'm going to explore the instructional principles that can make um, your instruction more highly flexible in a variety of learning contexts. And that's kind of the broad objective. For my overview, for the overview of my presentation, I'm going to start by going over the intro and background, go into some design and theoretical principles, and then putting theory into practice. Because I think it's really important to explain like what informs the design of like lesson planning. And I will then go over some practical examples that you'll have access to. Their OER lesson plan templates and worksheets that you're free to download, use, readapt, do whatever you want if you so choose. So a little bit about my institution. So I work at SUNY Geneseo. It's located south of Rochester, New York. It's in a rural area. I can look out my window and see all the farmland around me. We have around 3,900 students, and it's mostly a residential campus. So we have relatively few commuters. We have kind of a traditional campus. Most students start here when they're 18. And as a library, we teach around 320 to 360 information literacy sessions a year. And that's between six of us who are just exclusively research and instruction librarians. So we have people in other departments around the library, but they don't do any of the teaching or any of the reference. It's just us. Now, some things that have kind of changed over the past few years. This picture of my library, we just reopened the library after it was fully renovated. And at the end of 2019, our library closed down because there was asbestos, because it's a building from the 60s, and asbestos was falling from the ceiling. And so the building got closed down, and we were relocated into a temporary facility on campus for the past 5 years, and we just reopened this past November. So, keeping in mind that now our demands are increasing, both for people wanting us to do more workshops or asking us to participate in more programs for the library, as well as more faculty wanting more instruction because the new library is exciting for our campus. It is a great space, but it's also bringing some, new kind of burdens on our plates. So, a little bit about our information literacy program. One thing I encourage the librarians is I am always stressing, let's think about the relevance of what we're teaching to our students. And what I mean by that is I have been in when I first started teaching as an information literacy instructor, I would feel like, okay, I have this one opportunity to try to teach students everything about the library. And ultimately, I would try to teach these classes that would cover way too much content. And as I have grown over the years, I like to focus more on what do they need to know and what's like the kind of the minimum they need to know to do what they need to do for their class. Like, one of my mentors early on in my career said, you don't need to make them mini librarians. And that's something I find myself repeating to my instruction librarians to this day. And I know it's a commonplace kind of stressor, I think, because we're like, well, if we only see them this one time and this might be their only library work information literacy session they receive in 4 years, like we want to relay more. But so what I tried to do is as I train librarians and mentor them, focus on addressing what's most useful for the students and really working with the faculty to tailor their instruction and be course integrated. So less of a generic model where we just come in and it's like, oh, here's our boilerplate lesson plan, but we really try to be, a part of the course. And the faculty who respond very well to that, we have a lot of very strong relationships. We have a, relatively small campus too, which helps. So, that's why some of this relationship building that we have with them is able to take place. The other thing that has been a staple of the instruction program is really focusing on active learning and engagement. And this is something that was here before I even took over as the head of research and instruction, but it's definitely something that I've continued to foster and really promote. And if any of you have taught undergrads, like the library, as much as exciting as I find the library, a lot of the undergraduates maybe sometimes need to warm up a little bit more to how exciting the library can be. So another aspect of, that we've tried in the past is, thinking about, okay, well, why don't we try to standardize our information literacy or just have like a selection of lesson plans that you can grab and go? First of all, at our college, we just got designated as New York's public honors college, and kind of along as a result of that, and but even before that designation, there's a lot of pride in like being unique and presenting things in, your own way as faculty members. And what I mean by that is, say we have like an anthropology 100 class and there's 4 or 5 sections of it. Well, while they might have some common learning outcomes, each professor will teach it in a slightly different way. So I can come up with, so I go into one class where I teach them about, a basic database searching. And then the other two of them might say, oh, we're not doing any type of research projects. We don't need you to come in. And then another one might say, well, I'm going to have them do this project and they need help with their citations. So it's really hard to like say, okay, this is my one lesson plan for like a swath of classes. Now, and then because of the kind of environment that has been fostered, it's here, people are kind of resistant to standardized lessons because um, they feel like it takes a lot of time to adapt a lesson to their needs anyway. So they're like, okay, we have this generic template, but then I have to like change all of it. And then they also feel like sometimes it's not specific enough. And we all have different kind of approaches to planning and teaching. And also here we have faculty status, so part of the librarian's academic freedom is, how they choose to teach. And so a lot of what I do is kind of set the expectation, but ultimately it's up to the librarians to teach the way they want to. So anyways, coming back to this, over time, our staffing has decreased at the library overall. And, I know this is a common kind of pain point for all of us in libraries. And, we do teach a lot of classes. And while it can be a point of pride, it's also a very big point of stress sometimes, especially on those weeks when you're like teaching 9 or 10 classes, and trying to like design something unique for them. It also, along with this, teaching too much, there's concerns amongst the librarians about saying no too much because we want to be, set boundaries, but also we know that if you keep saying no, eventually they'll stop asking. And then also just the mental and creative drain that comes from it, especially when we're like, okay, well, we know we need to do something hands-on, we want to do something creative, and over time, especially toward like, they start at the beginning of the semester very um chipper, and then, by midway point, we're starting to like feel a little less enthusiastic. And so, these are things as I meet with all of my librarians regularly and have one-on-one meetings, and I really listen to what they're telling me. And, when I start hearing reoccurring narratives, I want to try to address it in some way because I feel like if we if we don't change what we're doing and it's not working, you know, that's not going to help anything. And I want to help people feel a little less stressed. And so that's where I kind of came up with this idea of let's try to create a blend of general lessons and course specific lessons through what I call highly flexible lesson planning. So, we have our general lessons that, theoretically, when we do that, it would save time because they're pre-made. They often would have a broader context because they need to fit for anybody. And they often tend to fit skills over concepts. And so what I mean like that is how to search a database versus, um, concept mapping your research topic or something. And then we have our course specific lessons, which takes more time, but then it's more focused, has a more focused context and allows for more concept driven instruction. So like doing something, working with the faculty and determining like how they want their students to be analyzing a text. And so the evaluation exercise might be a little more beyond what we would typically think is just like a standard lesson. So I think taking all this feedback in from the librarians, I started like thinking about, okay, how can we kind of have the best of both worlds or at least kind of a compromise? And so that's where I came up with this idea of, okay, let's make lessons that kind of are standard, but then also give the librarians opportunities to customize them so that they have the feel of being custom for the faculty members. So, highly flexible lesson planning, it's basically a way to design reusable modular lessons that are easy to adapt to a variety of teaching contexts and emphasize active learning and critical thinking. And so the next couple of slides, I'm going to explain this a little bit more. Then I'm going to show you some examples because I know it's just talking about it without showing you wouldn't be very helpful. So when I was approaching like, okay, how can we do this? I had some different design principles in mind based on different educational theory. One of the things one of the instructional design models I really like is backward design. And this is where as you're thinking about your lesson planning, you start with your goal. So what's the outcome of the lesson? What do you want the students to walk away with? And then you kind of reverse engineer the instruction from there. So then you think about, okay, this is what I want them to do. And then you think about, okay, how would I assess that? And a lot of the assessment is just informal or in class, usually through the use of like questions or things like a 1 minute paper or something. And then from that way, then start thinking about, okay, what are the learning activities that will allow them to reach that goal? I just think it's helpful. So instead of letting the activities determine what the outcome is, letting the outcome determine the activities. Then, of course, I've already mentioned active learning, and really for this, just it comes from the constructivist philosophy in education, but we want students that engage their thinking and you really utilize and build off their prior knowledge. Because I always think like the nice thing about information literacy is all of our students are engaging in information literacy practices all day, every day on their phones and social media. And so it's like, okay, let's bring in some of that knowledge at the beginning of our lessons and try to connect that to what we're trying to talk about in our class. And, active learning and critical thinking are really kind of one-on-one, but I think of this as, just intentionally incorporating scaffolding. So not just dumping all the information on students, but kind of building up, starting where they are at and then trying to incorporate activities that will then help them expand on that. And I think a lot of this, I'm a huge proponent of asking questions of students. And I know you're like, oh, asking questions, but I mean like coming up and asking and developing good questions in the lesson plan itself. Because I don't know about you, but when I teach, asking questions out the top of my head, I do not ask good questions. I'll be like, so what did you all think? And that's not a good question. And so thinking ahead of time of what can I ask that will get the students to think and reflect. And then finally, the other kind of principle is chunking information. So just basically breaking down concepts. One of the things why I think this is important is again coming back to that idea I mentioned of it's not our job to make every student a mini librarian, even though that would be really fun. But like thinking about, okay, what do we need them to take away? And we don't want to like their th overload them with too much information. And so when we kind of group information around specific topics, that can help it be more digestible for students. So features of highly flexible lesson plans. So taking all that kind of like theoretical stuff and putting it into practice. I wanted to have the lessons that we specifically share with each other. So that's what I'm really talking about is we're creating a curriculum for each other based on these lesson plans we're designing that incorporate these different elements. So I wanted them to focus on broader instructional goals of our information literacy program. So one thing I did is I have restructured our goals of our program to be more broad and also fit. Like I sat down with all the librarians and I asked them like, okay, what are we teaching? And 99% of our classes kind of align with the idea of either locating information, evaluating information, or integrating information. So like integrating information might be, teaching them about citations. It might also be like teaching them, sometimes we teach classes on like how to paraphrase information. But then, so that's what I would like assess as the head of the unit. Like, are we meeting these goals? But then librarians can create specific student learning outcomes based around those ideas. Um, then I wanted to balance information literacy skills and concepts in these lessons. So, I know like over the years of ACRL, they went from the standards to um, the threshold concepts, and that was kind of in my opinion, a shaky transition. I strongly believe that we do need to teach students skills as well as trying to get them to understand the larger concepts. Like they need to know how to search a database, but they also need to be thinking about how do how do I question what's being said in this, or how do I analyze what's being said without just saying, oh, well, this is just all facts or this is all false information. But I also believe that the time that the students might need to practice those skills generally is probably a little bit less than what we think. And what I mean by that is I probably don't need to teach a 50-minute class just on database searching by itself and how to like click in the database. I think a lot of students, once they get an orientation to how it works, are usually fairly comfortable with that. But they might not, what they might have struggled more with is like, okay, how do we come up with those terms that, or how can we determine if these sources in here are peer reviewed or not? Another feature, I wanted these to be modular. So meaning as I worked with the librarians to determine what are we teaching, we also kind of looked at how long does it take us to teach something like database searching, which we came up with around like 15 minutes on average, or how long does it take to take evaluation, which we all agreed takes a longer amount of time, usually like 30. So I wanted us to think about if we're gonna create these activities, make them more modular in nature so that people can kind of like mix and match them together to create a lesson. And one thing I try to encourage the librarians is to scale back on their learning outcomes. I used to do this where I would have like 4 or 5 different learning outcomes for a lesson, and now I try to do 1 to 2. And that some of that just comes with me becoming more confident over time, but also like setting some boundaries with the faculty, like, no, I can't cover database searching, evaluation, citation, and whatever else they want in 50 minutes. Like that's just dumping a bunch of information at the students and they're not going to be able to really think about what I'm telling them. It's just going to feel like they're going to feel overwhelmed. And then I want the lessons to be adaptable. So think about one of the things we do in this kind of lesson plan template I'm going to show you is think about what aspect of the lesson needs to be like the activity, and then what is the content of the activity that could easily be swapped out. And so I'm going to show you some examples of that in a minute. So I put together a LibGuide that has these documents, and I'll just leave this up here for a moment, or somebody can type the URL in the chat for folks. But this just has the template I'm going to show you on it, as well as the lesson plans that you're free to use. I have licensed on everything under Creative Commons license, just the general one, so you can, if you want to use them or adapt them or whatever, you can. So it's just library.geneseo.edu/highflexlessons. And I'm going to keep this up for a while, and I know we'll be sharing our slides after the presentation, so you know you will get access to this. So one thing I wanted to go over first is here's the high flex, I call it high flex lesson plan template. And you'll see it kind of covers some of the things that um, it addresses some of the problems with just like doing a generic lesson would have. And one of the things that I was having a problem with when people would share lessons is everybody writes up their lesson plans differently. But also, like some people would know to include things like a learning objective, and other people wouldn't. And also some people would talk about assessment a lot, and others wouldn't. So this kind of addresses everything that I think is essential to create a good lesson, and that's helpful for me as a librarian if I'm borrowing the content from another person. So I have people type in their teaching scenario. So when they come up with a high flex lesson plan, have them tell me like why they created it, who they created it for. They can create an SLO. I also have them think about, okay, how might this connect to the ACRL framework? I'm not like, I don't push the ACRL framework that hard because I just don't. I'm not going to get into that into this presentation, but I think it's good to think about, and sometimes it can inspire how we design or approach our lessons. So, and I have them think about, okay, so before we even begin, how would you adapt this lesson? So what information could be swapped out if it's used in another class, and potentially how could it be adapted for an online environment if you happen to be teaching online? And so then the actual like content of what the activity is there an anticipatory set, or how do we activate prior knowledge? So I did include a link to an article I co-authored several years ago that talks about what an anticipatory set is. But basically, like, how do we engage students right off the bat? How do we ask them? It could be like a question or an analogy, it could be an image, a video clip, but something that can connect that where they might be to where I'm going to be taking them in the class. So then I have them include the direct instruction. So this is what would have the input before the active learning. So like, is it slides? Is it a lecture, a video, a demo? Um, what questions might you ask students? And then the active learning activity. So what is the actual activity that they'll be doing? And then um, finally, after the active learning, a follow-up with either more direct instruction or a closure. So like, um, what questions are you going to ask them? So these are all the components, and it all aligns with the different kind of instructional theories I mentioned before. There's active learning, there's critical thinking. Um, and so I felt like this is, helping me meet that goal. And it's also helpful if I'm borrowing an activity from someone, not having to come up with all that every time myself. So then I'm going to look at an example of this. I'm going to look at the one for comparing databases. So this is just how this one is filled out. So this is a lesson searching databases in the discovery layer. This is something we do all the time where in like a writing 105, which is our first year writing course, where we're looking at just teaching students some basics about using the library databases. And so in this activity, they'll look at how a database works versus the discovery layer on our website. And the goal is to get them to look at the differences, and then think about what search strategies. And yeah, so I'm not going to read through all of that, but you can look through it. It has a generally like, bullet points of how to do the lesson. And then I have a worksheet. And so in this case, oops, I think I pulled up the wrong. Let's see, comparing databases. Okay, yeah, here's the database sheet. So like, here's the corresponding worksheet that then a librarian could take and adapt. So here we can see they're going to be comparing the discovery later and then where the high flex part comes in is we can type in, okay, this is what our topic is for this class, or this is what the database is. So if I'm more in a sociology class, it might be sociological abstracts. Or if I'm in a biology class, it might be like Science Direct. But getting students to look at things like, okay, how many results did I get? What kinds of materials show up? What kind of filters are available? Um, how do you find the citation for it? And then asking them questions like, what do you think are the strengths and the weaknesses of this tool? So getting kind of guiding them through using the database without necessarily being like, this is where you click here, here, and here. And so this would be like a I don't know, 20-minute lesson or so that could be like one half of a class. But this would be something like if I was in a pinch for time, I could, quickly adapt it, print off this worksheet, type in my different database and topic for them to search for and be ready to go in class. And I know like, okay, because I've thought through all of these different instructional elements, I know it's a fairly solid activity. Another potential one is um, evaluating articles. Again, this one is kind of comparing scholarly and non-scholarly articles, or you could adapt it to two different types of scholarly articles, or like a scholarly article on a website. Like there's a lot of, flexibility in how I would do that. And then corresponding worksheet is this, where we have this chart. And so, and then the students go through and looking at the article and answer these questions. And why they have this is so that we can have a conversation after they fill it out. Because it's like a lot of times I know when we're teaching undergrads, just being like, so what did you think? Like, that's not a great question. And also, you're going to get a lot of blank stares. I just read an article about the Gen Z stare, which is like the scariest thing, I think, when I'm in front of the class, just like blank stares. So this gives them something, to discuss. And I can also, like, if I wanted to, I could collect it and use it as a form of assessment to be like, okay, like, how did they do on that? It's flexible in regards to anybody could print this off and you just provide, the articles. You could either put a link on here or you can print off the articles they want to use. But it's kind of I like to do a lot of I think one of the things present in this kind of like lesson planning is trying to get the students to voice their own thoughts about it versus me being like, this is what you should think about it. And so that's why I like to forefront like the first part of this evaluating sources might be like, this is generally how evaluating sources works, but then getting them to kind of interrogate some of those things a little bit more. So just to kind of wrap up, some of my observations about doing this kind of taking lesson planning, incorporating these different elements. Initially my colleagues were hesitant because again, they were like, well, we just do our own thing. But but once I saw it, they're like, okay, this is actually useful because, it does save a ton of time being like, okay, it's a solid activity, but we just need to like swap out the database or terms or whatever. And versus coming up with something that's completely integrated into somebody's course that only works for a specific course. So sharing, has improved among between the librarians. We don't have like this ginormous collection, but when we experiment with something in class that we think has a lot of potential, like that's when it starts going through kind of more of this formal development process. And, I really try to stress to them quality over quantity. We don't need to have a 10,000 of these, but like it's helpful to have like a smaller set of like really good lessons that we know are going to probably do their job most of the time. And just when I talk to librarians, I kind of ask them how it went when they tried using these, and they just think, the classroom time goes by fast. They like because they're facilitating more because, there is the stronger focus on active learning and, reducing the amount of class prep. And then I also did a project where, in the past couple of years, where we've tried assessing the classes where we're using this, and the students generally had a more positive response to the lessons, even though they were, more standardized in a way. But the students, what I liked is in some of their takeaways, they were more descriptive than in classes where we didn't use these activities. So, I mean, it's not hardcore evidence, but generally, I think this kind of lesson planning was achieving what I set out to do, which is if you need it, you can make your lesson planning a little bit easier for yourself. So thank you for attending. If you have any questions, you can always reach me at my email and I'll leave this LibGuide up for quite a while. But thank you.
Thanks so much, Brandon, and thank you to all of our presenters today. I know we are a little tad over our 11:30 time, but I think this was all great information. While you guys are putting in your last questions in the chat, our chat monitor Courtney will be dropping our link tree and also a feedback survey for our presentations today. So please take some time to give us some feedback. That'll only help us improve this great forum that we have every summer. Do we have any last questions for any of our presenters? And Brandon, I just want to say thank you so much. This is very timely for me. I hope you keep up that LibGuide because I will be sharing it. We have to share instruction duties here, and I just had to bring on one of our people who have never done instruction before, and so I'm putting together a packet. I'm going to include
Oh
this
yeah, that's like why in the
with
beginning I
her.
said a lot of my kind of like scholarship has, I mean, I came from I learned how to become a teacher, right? But then when you're in your MLS program, there's very few programs that require a class about teaching. And
Right.
so you're like standing up in front of all these students, you're like, it can be really intimidating.
Yes. Well, thank y'all so much, and thank you for including your contact. If you guys who've attended or are watching this recording later, feel free to reach out to our presenters with any follow-up questions. We will be ending today. No last questions, right, Courtney? I'm sorry, I'm pulling the chat up to look.
No, there's no questions in the chat.
Okay, great. We'll be posting these to our YouTube channel. Oh, the closed captioning. I forgot to press the closed captioning. Very sorry about that, everyone, but take care. Please come back tomorrow for our last day of presentations. Y'all have a great day.